Longest reigning monarchs in history. Who has ruled for the longest? We are going to examine the monarchs who have ruled for the greatest periods in history. You may think is the late Queen Elizabeth II, but she not so. Watch till the end to find out. These are the 10 monarchs whose reigns lasted the longest and whose countries were recognized as sovereign for the majority of their time in power. Let's get started with the list. Number 10. Queen Victoria, 63 years, 216 days. She ruled from 1837 to 1901. From 20 June 1837 until her passing on January 22, 1901, Victoria ruled the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Her 63-year and 7-month reign, also known as the Victorian era, was the longest ever by a British monarch. During her reign, the United Kingdom saw significant industrial, political, scientific, and military transformation, and the British Empire significantly expanded. She received the extra title of Empress of India in 1876 thanks to a resolution in the British Parliament. Victoria was the daughter of Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld and Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathern, King George III's fourth son. She was reared by her mother and her comptroller, John Conroy, after the deaths of her father and grandfather in 1820. Number 9. King Ferdinand I, 65 years, 90 days. He ruled from 1759 to 1825. Ferdinand I, who reigned over the two Sicilies from 1816 until his death on January 4, 1825, was restored to power following the Napoleonic Wars. Before it, he had served as Ferdinand III of Sicily and Ferdinand IV of the Kingdom of Naples since 1759. He was also Gozo's king. Napoleon and the revolutionary Parthenopean Republic both briefly removed him from the throne of Naples in 1799 and 1805, respectively, until he was reinstated in 1816. King Charles VII of Naples and V of Sicily's third child with his wife Maria Amalia of Saxony was named Ferdinand. Charles became King Charles III of Spain on August 10, 1759, succeeding his older brother Ferdinand VI. However, according to treaty requirements, he was not permitted to wield all three thrones at once. Because his oldest son Philip had been declared ineligible for succession owing to illness, and his second son Charles was the apparent successor to the Spanish throne, he abdicated his Neapolitan and Sicilian titles in favor of his third son on October 6. Number 8. Chechen Immix, Kowil, 67 years, 130 days. He ruled from 628 to 695 Anno Domini. The Maya city-state of Kapan's 12th ruler was Chechen Immix Kowil. He went by the name Smoke Jaguar. 16 days following the passing of Kakchen Yopat, Smoke Immix was crowned. He is said to have had the longest reign of any Kapan king, dominating from 628 to 695. He is thought to have been born around Anno Domini 612 and was crowned king when he was 15 years old. For the first 26 years of his reign, archaeologists have found little trace of activity, but in Anno Domini 652, there was a sudden burst in the creation of monuments, with 2 stelae being erected in the Great Plaza and another 4 in significant locations across the Kapan Valley. Each of these monuments honored a Katan ending. He also built a stela at the Santa Rita location, which is 7.5 miles away and is referenced in connection with the same incident in 652 on Queri's Altar L. After the earlier constraint on his ability to rule however he pleased ended, it is believed that he tried to establish his control throughout the entire valley. After this sudden burst of activity, Smoke Immix continued to rule until almost the end of the 7th century. During this time, he dedicated an additional 9 known monuments and made significant alterations to the Kapan architecture, including the building of Structure 2 to block off the Great Plaza's northern side and a new iteration of Temple 26 known as Chorka. Number 7. Franz Joseph I, 67 years, 355 days. He ruled from 1848 to 1916. Franz Joseph I, also known as Francis Joseph I, was the Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary. He was born on August 18, 1830. He additionally served as president of the German Confederation from May 1, 1850 to August 24, 1866. He was the longest-serving emperor, seventh longest-serving monarch overall, and the longest-reigning head of state in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. To put an end to the revolutions of 1848 in Hungary, Minister-President Felix Schwarzenberg arranged for Franz Joseph's uncle Emperor Ferdinand to renounce his throne at Olomouc in December 1848. Then, Franz Joseph became the new king. Being largely regarded as reactionary, he spent the first part of his reign fighting against constitutionalism in his territories. Following the Second and Third Italian Wars of Independence, 1859 to 1866, the Austrian Empire was compelled to hand over to the Kingdom of Sardinia control over Tuscany and the majority of its claim to Lombardy-Veneto. Following Austria's loss in the Austro-Prussian War, Franz Joseph did not yield any land to the Kingdom of Prussia, but the Peace of Prague, 23 August 1866, resolved the German question in Prussia's favor, preventing the unification of Germany under the rule of the House of Habsburg. Number 6. Kinnicks Jenob Pakel I, 68 years, 33 days. He ruled from 615 to 683 Anno Domini. Kinnicks Jenob Pakel I, also known as Pakel or Pakel the Great, was the Ajah of the Maya city-state of Palenque during the late Classic era of pre-Columbian Mesoamerican chronology. His Mayan name is Kinnicks Jenob Pakel. He assumed the throne in July 615 and remained in power until his demise. Pakel ruled for 68 years, which ranks as the sixth longest reign of any sovereign monarch in history, the longest in the globe for more than 1,000 years, and still the longest reign of any resident monarch in the history of the Americas. Some of Palenque's most remarkable surviving inscriptions and massive buildings were built or expanded during Pakel's reign. Pakel is arguably most known in popular culture for the carving of his likeness on the lid of the sarcophagus, which has given rise to pseudo-archaeological theories. Number 5. Muhammad Jua Zainal AlAdeline II, 68 years, 220 days. He ruled from 1710 to 1778. Pajuka's Sri Sultan Muhammad Jua Zainal AlAdeline Muazzam Shah, the second Ibn al-Marhum Sultan Ahmad Tajuddin Holland Shah I, 1699 to 23 September 1778, sometimes spelled Sultan Muhammad Jua Zain al-AlAdeline Muazzam Shah, was the 19th Sultan of Kedah. He ruled from 1710 to 1778, and many of the city's present landmarks are named in his honor. He is widely recognized as the founding father of Al-Ursedar. Having ruled for a total of 68 years and 220 days, he was also the fifth longest reigning sovereign monarch in the world and the longest reigning sovereign monarch in Malaysian history with historically provable dates. He traveled on pilgrimage to Jambi and Palembang, where he encountered the Arab spiritual guide Sheikh Abdul Jalil, and he traveled to Java and India with him. He was solemnly installed at the Balai Peng Hadapan, Istana Bukit Pinang, in May 1710 after his return from exile in Langkawi. The 20th of December 1735 saw the move of his capital to Ulurstar. After the Ayutthaya kingdom was captured in 1767, he acknowledged Burmese dominance, but he paid tribute to prevent tax and Siamese invasion in 1769. When the Bugis came and captured Kuala Kita Fort in March 1771, he retreated to Kangar in Perlis. Number 4. Johann II to 70 years, 91 days. He ruled from 1858 to 1929. Between 1858 and 1929, Johann II, often known as Johann II the Good, Johann II der Gut, was the Prince of Liechtenstein. His reign of 70 years and 91 days was the fourth longest overall, for which exact dates are known. After King Louis XIV, Queen Elizabeth II, and King Gubal Aduliadej. It was also the third longest of any sovereign monarch in European history, behind those of King Louis XIV and Queen Elizabeth II. The first constitution of Liechtenstein was published by Johann II in 1862. In 1921, Johann II approved a new constitution following the First World War. Common Liechtensteiners were given significant political powers as a result, and the principality became a constitutional monarchy. The constitution has been updated, most notably in 2003, but it has endured. In 1866, Liechtenstein resigned from the German Confederation. Shortly after, the Liechtenstein army was disbanded because it was thought to be a waste of money. Number 3. Rama 9 to 70 years, 126 days, he ruled from 1946-2016. Bhumibol Adulyadej is the 9th monarch of Thailand from the Chechen dynasty, reigning since June 9, 1906. He was the world's longest-serving head of state from the death of Emperor Hirohito of Japan in 1989 until his death in 2016, and is the third longest-reigning monarch in history after King Louis XIV and Queen Elizabeth II, reigning for 70 years and 126 days. Forbes pegged Bhumibol's net worth at $30 billion in 2010, and from 2008 to 2013, he topped the publication's list of the world's richest royals. This includes assets managed by the Crown Property Bureau, a body that is neither privately nor publicly owned. Assets managed by the Bureau were owned by the Crown as an institution, not by the monarch as an individual. Number 2. Elizabeth II to 70 years, 214 days. She ruled from 1952 to 2022. From 6 February 1952 until her passing on 8 September 2022. Elizabeth II served as the monarch of the United Kingdom. At the time of her death, she was the queen regnant of 15, down from 32 during her lifetime. Her 70 years and 214 days of rule made her the longest reigning female head of state in history, as well as the longest reign of any British monarch. Elizabeth was born in Mayfair, London, as the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York, later King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth was the presumed heir when her father assumed the throne in 1936, following the abdication of his brother, King Edward VIII. She received a private home education before starting to serve in the Auxiliary Territorial Service during the Second World War. She wed former Greek and Danish royal Philip Mountbatten in November 1947. Their union lasted 73 years until he passed away in April 2021. Edward, Anne, Andrew, and Charles were their 4 children. Number 1. Louis XIV to 72 years, 110 days. He ruled from 1643 to 1715. From 14 May 1643 until he died in 1715, Louis XIV, often known as Louis the Great, Louis le Grand, or the Sun King, Le Roi Soleil, ruled France. Although Louis XIV's France was representative of the era of absolutism in Europe, the king surrounded himself with a variety of significant political, military, and cultural figures. His 72 years and 110 days of reign are the longest recorded for any monarch of a sovereign country in history. After Cardinal Mazarin, his chief minister, passed away in 1661, Louis took over as ruler of France. Believing in the divine right of kings, Louis continued the work of his forebears in establishing a centralized state run by the capital. He wanted to get rid of the remaining feudalism that still existed in some areas of France, and he was able to appease the aristocracy, many of whom had taken part in the Fronde while he was still a minor, by forcing them to live in the opulent Palace of Versailles.